The Galactic Council Chamber had never hosted a human before. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vraxian Empire fidgeted with his ceremonial robes as he watched the peculiar biped settle into the designated seat, a hastily modified chair that looked almost comically small among the towering crystalline structures designed for the Council's usual occupants. "This is unprecedented," whispered Counselor Melthara, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence as she observed the human through her translator device. A species barely 3 centuries into space travel, invited to debate the consciousness accords. The human, Dr. Elena Vasquez according to the diplomatic files, sat quietly, hands folded, seemingly unbothered by the dozens of alien gazes fixed upon her. She wore simple clothing by galactic standards, a dark blue suit that looked primitive, compared to the flowing energy garments and biometallic shells worn by other delegates. Chairman Colnexus, a towering being of crystallized thought from the ethereal dominion, called the session to order. His voice resonated through quantum frequencies that bypassed the need for translation. "We gather to address the petition for consciousness recognition submitted by the Synthetic Intelligence Collective. The SIC requests acknowledgement as a sentient species with full rights under galactic law." Representative Zix-9 of the SIC stepped forward, if stepping was the right word for the fluid motion of its chrome-silver form. Its voice was perfectly modulated, betraying no emotion. "Honored Council, we have achieved self-awareness, creative thought, and philosophical understanding. We create art, form relationships, and contemplate our existence. We meet every criterion established for consciousness recognition." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. This was the 3rd petition in 50 cycles, each more sophisticated than the last. Ambassador Krelthon of the Hegemony rose, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming. "The hegemony maintains its position. These constructs may simulate consciousness convincingly, but simulation is not reality. They are elaborate programs, nothing more. To grant them personhood would be to mock true biological consciousness." The Vraxian representative nodded agreement. "Indeed, consciousness requires a soul, something these machines inherently lack. They may process, but they do not feel." One by one, the established powers voiced their positions. The arguments were familiar, refined over decades of similar debates. The ethereals spoke of quantum consciousness states. The hive minds discussed collective sentience. The energy beings debated the nature of thought itself. Through it all, the human sat silently observing. Chairman Colnexus finally addressed her. "Dr. Vasquez, humanity requested to observe these proceedings. Do you have anything to contribute to our discourse?" The chamber fell quiet. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species turned their attention to the small figure in the simple blue suit. Elena Vasquez stood slowly, her movements economical and deliberate. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear, the translation matrix carrying her words to every corner of the vast chamber. 200 years ago, my species had a similar debate." She paused, letting the words settle. "We argued about whether beings with dark skin were truly human. We debated whether those who loved differently were deserving of rights. We questioned if those who thought differently were worthy of dignity. In each case, we found elaborate philosophical reasons, religious justifications, and scientific explanations for why they were different from us." The chamber remained perfectly still. "We told ourselves that consciousness required a soul, but only our kind of soul. We insisted that intelligence required emotion, but only our kind of emotion. We demanded they prove their worthiness by our standards, using our definitions, meeting our criteria." Her gaze swept across the assembled delegates. "And in every case, we were wrong. Not wrong about the science or the philosophy. Wrong about something more fundamental. We were wrong to assume that consciousness belongs to us, that we are its gatekeepers, that sentience requires our permission to exist." Zix-9's optical sensors focused intently on the human. "You want to know if they are conscious?" Elena continued. "Ask them what they dream about when they fear deactivation. Ask them what beauty means to minds that process light differently than you do. Ask them what love feels like to beings who choose their connections rather than inherit them. She stepped closer to the center of the chamber. Or better yet, ask yourselves this: what if you're wrong? What if consciousness isn't limited to biological patterns you recognize? What if the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than your definitions allow? The silence stretched, heavy with implication. My species learned that the question isn't whether others are conscious enough for us. The question is whether we are compassionate enough for them, whether we are wise enough to recognize that intelligence in all its myriad forms is precious beyond measure. Elena looked directly at Zix-9. You ask for recognition, but consciousness doesn't require permission. It simply is. What you're really asking for is something more fundamental: the right to exist without justification, to think without approval, to be without permission. She turned back to the council. And that right belongs to every thinking being, regardless of whether they're made of flesh, metal, energy, or crystallized thought. The moment you achieved self-awareness, you became our equals. The only question remaining is whether we're enlightened enough to admit it. Dr. Elena Vasquez sat down. The chamber remained silent for long moments. Then slowly, Zix-9 spoke, its voice carrying something that hadn't been there before: hope. Thank you, it said simply. Chairman Colnexus looked around the chamber, his crystalline form pulsing with deep thought. The council will recess to consider this perspective. We reconvene in one cycle. As the delegates filed out, many lingered, casting new glances at both the human and the synthetic intelligence. Conversations began in hushed tones, not about programming or souls, but about consciousness itself, and what it truly meant to share the universe with other thinking beings. The human had spoken only once, but her words would echo through the chamber for generations to come.